This is a Film Stories original podcast.
We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf on the We Made This podcast network. My name's Mark Adams and I am your host for this 6th of 7 episodes in a week on the Red Dwarf Smegazines. Today we're looking at Smegazine issue 13, and with me at this time is Colin Jackson Brown.
Hello.
We're also being joined by Carl Bryan.
Look, I know it's against protocol for us to record in our underwear, but it's hot and I'm doing it anyway.
Fair. It's fucking boiling.
I was actually going to take my shirt off and be like sexy Mark, but so we're not actually on video call, so I might get my nips out. Mm-hmm. I haven't decided yet, but yeah, we're recording on a hot day.
Yeah, for the listeners, you can't see it, but you'll know. That's all that matters.
It'll have that kind of vibe.
But yeah, so there's been a little bit of a time since the last recording as well. By the time this goes out, it will have been over a year since the first magazine episodes went out. And there were 6 months in between issues 8 to 10. Then we did 11 and 12 about 3 months ago. So yeah, this hasn't been exactly what we planned, but we did it, or at least we've nearly done it
through sheer dogged determinism.
Don't count your chickens. We've only just started. It could all fail horribly.
True. Should we get on with it then? Smegazine issue 13.
Yeah,
let's do it.
Front cover has Crichton in the USA as a main feature, so there's like a standard Crichton photo. There's also a subpanel saying on stage with Hattie and Space Monkeys comic strip.
Lister meets the Space Monkeys is what it says, which is very exciting.
Yeah. Also, do you think Hattie Hayridge deliberately wears black clothing just so it looks like her head's floating?
I think there's a good chance.
But I just want the artwork back. I just want the artwork back.
But he looks so sweet on the front cover.
Boring photo is boring.
It is a bit stock, isn't it?
Also, it is bringing back one of Mark's favourite subjects in the whole of the Red Dwarf-averse, which is the US pilot.
Yes.
Oh, I know, right? So the editorial is basically the contents page, but they've called it an editorial. It's not very interesting unless either of you have anything you want to say about it.
No, but they've got the Junior Encyclopedia of Space bit underneath it. So that they don't really go with the contents page anymore, do they? They've just got like two paragraphs that mention a few things that's in it, which is fine.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I'd have preferred contents to the Junior Encyclopedia of Space because it was a bit shit.
I had to laugh at some of it. Because one of the bits is there where it's just asking questions that I'm guessing they get a lot of sent into them. One is Craig Charles in a sitcom called Help? And like, no, you're thinking of Jake Abrahams. Part of me initially went, that's racist.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I thought.
Ignorant racism, not hate racism. There is a difference, but it's definitely racism.
It's not racism from the magazine, from this magazine, we should point out. It's from one of the readers. Nicholas Walker, you fucking racist.
Well, he's a bad racist, but he's not the worst racist. Like I say, ignorance racism can be cured. Hate racism can't.
Yes.
Yeah. He could just be really short-sighted.
It's possible.
Yeah. But you think someone would have pointed it out by now. Also, the name Adam Davies comes up a lot on these questions. And you're just thinking, you watch the show, surely you must know some of this stuff.
I wonder if he was like just a very, very young boy or something. Is this a repeat person who keeps writing in?
He turns up on a few. Yeah.
He does ask. I mean, it is a fairly legitimate question. What year is Red Dwarf set in? Is one of the questions that he asks on there, because the continuity is all over the fucking place, and nobody had ever really decided at that point.
No,
and potentially still haven't.
Yeah, it was interesting them pointing out that Crichton's from a much later century than possibly Lister and the others, and that's something like, oh no, I forgot about that. That he's not essentially from the same time as the others.
Yeah.
Once you've got to 6 million years, what's a few thousand?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Next up is news from the Dwarf, and there's some news that I had never heard of before, that a new Holly was considered for Series 6, which sucks.
Yeah, it was under consideration, so it's really fucking vague. They hadn't decided what they were going to do yet, by the sounds of it. But I'm so glad they didn't, because
me too.
Fucking kick. I mean, basically, the reason that Holly wasn't there is they'd run out of lines to give Hattie, which was crap anyway. But that was pretty much why. So if they'd have then got a replacement in, that would have been really fucking insulting. So I'm glad
it would have been a shitty thing to do.
It's a thing we're going to see over this issue and the next issue. Is whenever they talk about Series 6, there's very much a theme of, nothing's really been nailed down, and it's just kind of happening. Apart from the fact that the next bit of news is they've got a director, and that's pretty much it.
Yes.
Yeah. Other interesting news is that Peter Ragg has won an award, well deserved in my opinion.
Design award from the Royal TV Society, which is absolutely well deserved.
The other thing is that there's a new Red Dwarf baseball jacket, which I remember wanting when I was a kid.
Which one? The £60 basic jacket or the £90 for the leather sleeve deluxe model?
Who would want the basic when you could have leather sleeves in 1993?
It's a very fucking 90s jacket, isn't it? Or early 90s jacket.
The 90est.
It looks very much like you'd see. I mean, obviously without the Red Dwarf bit, you'd see like a New Jack Swing band wearing it on Top of the Pops or something like that.
Yeah.
Just stick the word deluxe on anything in the 90s, like, oh, this is the shit. This is the one.
But you've missed the major bit of news. The bit of news that we were waiting for right from episode 1 of this magazine. So this is issue 13, so over a year. The release date for the long-awaited first series of Red Dwarf on video is March the 1st. So less than a month away from when this issue came out. So really short notice, and we're finally getting it.
It's finally here.
It still baffles me, the orders that they release the videos in, but the only other thing that I noticed was that Cyberzone, Maid Marian and Britas were all being filmed at the same time, which kind of in my head gives me almost an oversight of what all the actors were doing in that year, which is kind of cool.
The viewing figures for Cyberzone, bloody hell. 3.1 million for that tat.
But it was the future then.
If I was on Maid Marian, which was getting 3.2, I'd be pissed off.
Yeah. Because it's a lot fucking better.
I've got a soft spot for Cyberzone.
Although this is showing as well that the British being the 7.4, that Chris Barry was heading towards his peak of 90s, King of Telly at the time.
Yeah.
It felt a bit bad for Robert Llewellyn because he hasn't got anything going on in terms of this at the moment. I mean, later on in the issue, we'll see what he is doing, but...
Yeah. Next up is the Androids comic book, and I think even in 1993, the line "Rust in Peace" was a cliche.
It's a pretty good Megadeth album, though.
I just fucking hate it. It's cack.
See, I've had a little bit of a sort of epiphany on the Androids comic. I still don't like it.
Right.
It is shit. I think it's meant to be.
Yeah.
I think the whole point is it's a throwaway soap that is utter cack.
Yeah.
And yeah, it does the job.
Yeah, if you look at it like a parody of Neighbours at the time in the early 90s, it's pretty, or even the American soaps, like that One Life to Live sort of thing, it's pretty much like that. And I'm actually remembering this line from these bits from when I first read the magazines. Now we've got like the evil villain character coming in, and all this kind of stuff. There is the line in this, "Not now, I'm not in the mode," which I really like.
That is a good pun.
That's a good pun.
That is a good pun, whereas Rust in Peace was a cliche. I'll give you that.
I've been worried lubricantless as well. That's a good one.
Next up is the Robert Llewellyn interview, and we find out here what he's been doing, which includes a show with Mac McDonald that he can't remember the name of that I really want to watch.
I don't think it exists.
I was going to say, does it exist? I bet it doesn't.
I spent a good 5 minutes looking, and it's not listed on IMDb for either Mac McDonald or Robert Llewellyn. He says that they did a little sketch for it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's going to end up going out.
Yeah,
it could be one that ended up on the cutting room floor. And as it was just one sketch, from a sketch show that got lots of other people on it, it could be anything, but we won't know because if their bit got cut from it, that's the only clue we had. So yeah.
He also reveals he was in a sitcom like before Channel 4 called Buckham and Riskett.
Yes,
which I love. I love the name of that. I want to find that. I haven't done my research for that, but I really want to find that show.
If it exists, we'll do a special.
I believe it exists, but I don't think it's available anywhere. I think it's some lost media. So I don't think we're going to be able to. But Carl is the master for finding these things, so there you go, mate. There's a challenge.
I will have a look, see what I can find.
He also talks about his contract for the USA. A 6-year contract? That's fucking brutal.
Yes.
It must have been a lot of money for him to be prepared to potentially leave his home for 6 years.
He would have most likely had to leave the UK Red Dwarf, I would have thought as well.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Because it would be, American series, they're going to want, 22, 23 episodes. That's going to take up most of the year to do. Then he's got to do all the promotion for it while it's screening. He might have a few weeks off, and then they'll want him for the next series. So it wouldn't leave him much time elsewhere.
Yeah, he kind of got lucky with it. They all kind of did, because a lot of the time with these ones, especially these days, they'll have the thing of, right, that show didn't work, but we've still got you under contract, so we're going to stick you in something else.
Yeah.
And that, especially with stuff on the CW, so you've got like your Smallvilles, your Supernaturals, stuff like that. If you're in one and you're like a successful guest star, they'll give you a show, or they'll put you in another show,
like a stealth pilot sort of thing.
Yeah. So if they, because I think he says they pretty much let him out of it, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they were very nice about it. They could have just gone, no, Robert, you're doing 6 years of this.
Well, some contracts are fucking horrible. I know more about music industry ones, but you get somewhere it's like an exclusivity contract where if you sign to record an album, then the label decides they don't want to put it out. No one else can put it out, and they may have a clause in the contract that says you can't record an album for anybody else for a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
And you get bands that are just stuck, not able to do anything at all. So I assume there's similar sorts of things in TV.
Yeah. I remember, I think it must have been the late 90s, there was a big deal about ITV putting people in what was called golden handcuffs.
Yeah, that's going to be the same thing, isn't it?
Yeah, the thing I remember was like, they go, we got Ross Kemp. Oh, yeah. And they just put him in loads of like one-off dramas and stuff like that. And then they did it with like Marty McCutcheon. Basically, it was just any hot soap actor after they left, ITV would try and get him in a golden handcuffs. Robson Green, that's why he was in pretty much all of anything that was on during the late 90s. And so, yeah, it's I can imagine the BBC would have tried to put Chris Barry in one.
Yeah.
He never did out for ITV.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them did.
The only other thing I found it quite funny, actually, reading further on, that he was referred to as a stupid Canadian trying to be posh by American people.
Which is fair. The accent that he's going for with Crichton is definitely a bit Canadian and a bit posh.
I was a bit confused initially as to which Craig he's talking about in the last sort of anecdote. I'm guessing it's Craig Charles.
That's Craig Charles, it's got to be.
Yeah, because the idea of Craig Bierko seeing him in the street, running at him and jumping on his back, he'd kill him. He'd just destroy Robert Llewellyn.
Wow.
And I can definitely imagine Craig Charles doing it.
Yeah.
As well. I like the bit where he was talking about in the USA they'd got bigger sets, so the doorways were taller, but he still had got it in his head that he had to duck as he was going through the doorways and stuff.
I like the fact he was selfless enough for them to go, so Crichton's bolder and wittier in the US version. Did you have a hand in that? No. He could have just played it off. Yeah, it's all me.
Yeah.
That's why it's funnier. It's like, no, it wasn't.
I did that.
Next up is Hollygrams, and there's a letter where it's not Holly, but the person pretending to be Holly says, "There's always one, isn't there?" And it seems to me like in these letter pages, there's always 5 or 6.
Yeah.
There's an interesting bit that kind of sprung for me. There's a bit where they're talking about Better Than Life, and he starts talking about canisters that appear in the book. And reading it, I was like, what is he talking about? And then I remembered that I mostly listened to the audiobook abridged, so that isn't in.
Really?
Yeah.
It's a major plot point.
Yeah.
See, what I thought was really good in that is they edited the letter to take out bits that would spoil it for people, which is directly the opposite of what they'd done an issue or so before, where they had the Read Any Good Books Lately issue on Better Than Life and Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers, where it detailed loads of plot points with spoilers all over it. Whereas this one, they deliberately avoid that, which is what I'm also deliberately avoiding doing at the moment. But it is a really important part of the book of what the canisters were. So it's like, read it again, dickhead.
Do you remember when we got confused about the dates on the Smegazines? Turns out that I wasn't crazy.
Yes.
Because there's someone else who wrote in about it.
Yes, they had 2 November issues.
Yeah.
I like is what the guy talking. The gentleman wrote in about the party he went to, which was Red Dwarf themed, and they had a picture of Holly on the wall.
Yeah,
was missing that right? Which I was like, I want that in my flat, just a giant picture of Holly. But then I know what will happen. I'll spend too much time in the flat, and I'll start talking to it.
And then it will talk back.
That's the bit I'm worried about, yeah.
Next up is the Space Monkeys comic strip. And from the very first panel, I was like, well, this art's fucking excellent.
It's Nigel Kitching again. He's fucking fantastic. Utterly brilliant. I love his art, as we've said in a few previous issues. I really like this strip as well. It's basically Lister finds some bath salts and some space monkeys, as in sea monkeys, and accidentally mixes them up. So ends up with essentially the trouble with tribbles.
It was a very on-brand thing that Lister does something dumb and creates a monster, and it worked really well, I think.
Yeah. I like the fact that he's found them in the possessions of the dead crew, which I think after a certain amount of time we'd all start doing that.
Yeah.
But who in the crew had a crate of lager and chili bath salts?
Peterson.
Yeah.
If it wasn't Lister, it was Peterson. Maybe Chen, maybe Selby, but most likely Peterson. But lager and chili bath salts. The chili worries me a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't think that would be a good idea.
Now, I do like me a bath bomb. I'm a fan of Lush, and I often treat myself to a nice bath. But I wouldn't want lager or chili, particularly chili.
The lager would just be gross. The chili would potentially burn. You don't want that when you're in the bath.
No. Did you ever have sea monkeys?
No.
I wanted them.
I think they were less of a thing by the time. I think they were more of a 70s thing, weren't they?
Oh, they were definitely advertised to me in some kind of comic. I'm sure I remember seeing them advertised.
Could that have been an American import comic, though? If it was a Marvel comic or something like that?
No, because I think it was through like a mail order joke catalogue. If we're talking a long time ago, though.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, I always wanted to get some.
Yeah, I remember seeing them, but never wanted them because they seemed weird to me. And for some reason, it's not triggering, but seeing the monsters, the space monkeys, jump out the back is like, oh, it does make me squirm somewhat. But I think it does go with, like I say, with the art, sort of how they almost look like they've escaped from another comic.
Yes,
and arrived in this one,
like Sonic the comic.
Yeah, like the frame of the cat trying to eat one is just kind of odd.
Great.
Yeah. Going back to the art as well, the Nigel Kitchings art, the fact that in every time he appears, Rimmer looks pained and angry, just in every shot he does. And it's actually, we've talked before about the balance between these, the kind of adult and kid side of it. They kill all of the space monkeys.
Yeah.
It's genocide. It's definitely genocide.
The more and more they keep evolving, the more and more they start to look like monsters. And like to the point where they're actually quite gross. And then they blow them all up. And it's like, oh my god. It's really... And then the punchline of it is Cat's got another pouch of space monkeys, and he walks off with almost an evil look on his face that he's gonna make some more. And it's like, it's a bit dark.
Yeah, it really is. Next up is the 10%ers on location, which is basically about the new project, well, at the time, that Grant Naylor were working on. And yeah, it's actually really quite interesting. I quite liked it.
I remember watching the 10%ers at the time, primarily because they've gone, oh, it's from Grant Naylor. And I actually watched a couple of episodes. There's only a couple knocking around on like YouTube. I don't think there's the whole series, but I enjoy it. It's a very 90s sitcom.
I've never seen it at all.
I've watched the pilot episode, which is the one, because it was originally just made, as they talk about in the article, as a pilot from a series of different pilots to see which ones would get picked up by ITV. And the episode that I saw, I really wasn't very impressed with. It was really generic.
Yeah, I love those series made up of pilots because it's always the ones that don't make. Channel 4 used to do them all the time.
Yes.
And there was one, and it was called Blackout, and I don't know how this would have worked as a series at all, but the main character was a white woman who was casually racist but didn't believe she was. But whenever she got... Well, this was the thing. Whenever she got kind of turned on or drunk or something like that, where her inhibitions got lowered, she transformed into Reginald D. Hunter.
Oh, shit.
I think it was written by him as well. And I just remember watching it when I was younger. What is this? And how will this possibly get turned into a series?
I mean, I like Reginald D. Hunter, but what?
Yeah, it was so weird. There was things like she would wake up next to women because he'd go out and seduce women, and in the morning she'd have to explain what was going on and just couldn't do it. Just really odd. And that, yeah, I can see why that one didn't make it. But But it's always stuck in my head. I've looked for it. It's not on like all four or anything because it's just like, it can't be that weird, but it is so that weird.
The other thing that was really interesting about this was that you could tell just how bitter they were after Red Dwarf USA as well. It was definitely an undertone of this article.
Yeah, I think that might be why I wasn't that keen on it. I just didn't find it as fun as some of the rest of the magazine.
This is the series where they split up, essentially, not this pilot, but there is a bit in the interview where they're talking to Rob Grant and Doug Naylor's just kind of pottering around behind them. But he's chipping in and disagreeing with Rob about writing it. And Rob's like, well, you're supposed to be doing the interview. And, I'm just having my lunch. It's like, And it really feels like the American series is what put the crack in it.
Yeah.
For me.
I think so.
Yeah.
There's a fun gag, though, about how the series was only rejected by the BBC once. That was a fun gag. Next up is Heard Any Good Books Lately, which is obviously a play on the Read Any Good Books Lately. And it's an article about the audiobook of Infinity Welcomes Careful Drivers. And I don't remember whether I did this or not. It was $25.99 on 6 cassettes. Yeah. I did a inflation calculator. That's £45.19.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Audible is a lot cheaper than that these days.
Is it on Audible?
Yeah.
It is. Oh, cool.
Is it the proper unabridged version with Chris Barry doing it all?
Yep.
Awesome.
I have it on my Audible. It cost me £7, not £45.19.
Yeah. I think I've got a credit to spend at the moment. I might do that.
But I did think this was a fair review. It doesn't rave, and it does criticise the sound quality as well. So it was clearly a fair review.
Yeah.
I kind of chuckled to myself about that. It's like, my tapes were a bit hissy. It was like, well, that could be anything.
Might be listening to it on a really shit Walkman.
Yeah, have you got any magnets in your car? Are you listening to them on the drive to work? Your speaker's a big pile of crap. There's a lot of that. I mean, obviously now we've got Audible and other things like that, and we can listen clear as day, and some of them are remastered and things like that. Like I know they did the quote-unquote radio show versions, which was just Chris Barry doing it with sound effects as well. But it's... Because I've got the abridged ones again, but obviously when we do the review, we'll have to do one of us do the unabridged and one of us do the abridged and see what's missing from the other one's version. But
could work.
Interesting.
So I say it's been a long time since I read the full unabridged version. So for me, I can only remember the abridged version. So stuff like the canisters, like we mentioned earlier. I mean, me going back and reading it, this could be a whole different thing for me, listening to an unabridged one.
Yeah, well, I most recently, rather than listening to the abridged audiobook, have read the book a couple of times over the last few years. So that's why I've got that in my head, because that was in the book.
Next up is the next month adverts. And we're going to get comic strips of Dwayne Dibley, Mr. Flibble, and Ace Rimmer. There's going to be articles on Britass, Red Dwarf 6, and the Robert Llewellyn interview will continue, and a competition to win a Red Dwarf jacket.
If only we could go back in time and enter that competition.
I was going to say, you've probably missed the closing date on that one.
I know. Next up is the Graham Hutchins interview, and I hadn't heard of him, but he's the videotape editor for Red Dwarf.
Need to read the credits more, Mark.
I'm more likely to sing along than read.
I really enjoyed this interview just because of when I started doing video work, it was still on tape. And so a lot of this was like, I know what he's talking about with some of the tapes he's on about. But also this, for me, and considering how long it is, reached the point of we couldn't get anyone else.
I, again, really like this one. But whereas, Carl, you could relate to it because you knew about that kind of thing, I like the fact that it was something I had absolutely no knowledge of at all. So it's an aspect that not many people know about with how, TV and film were made back then. And I thought it was quite interesting learning the different things that a VT editor did, because now it's obviously going to be totally different with different technology and everything. There was a nice little fact, sort of bit of information in there, where he was saying that initially they'd done some proper effect work for the Despair Squid in Back to Reality, where they'd actually filmed an octopus in a tank. But then when they got to the edit stage, it didn't look right. So they ended up actually making a shadow of a squid in the edit suite. And that's what was eventually used in the episode.
Yeah. I mean, it's some of these people who work on things like these have changed the course of the very famous example being the last shot of Blackadder Goes Forth.
Oh God, with the poppies, yeah.
Yeah, that was the editor who came forward and it was like this, because they watched it, and if you ever see the documentary they made a few years ago where they're talking about it, they're saying, like, John Lloyd's like, I've cocked up. No, I've ruined it. Because the shot itself is they run out over the top and they get shot immediately.
Yes.
But when the editor turned around and went, if I slow it down, I think he slows it down to like 10%, and then do that, and then somebody went, let's do the poppies.
Yeah.
So if it wasn't for that editor, then Blackadder Goes Forth would no way near be remembered as the sort of iconic ending that it is.
That's it. It's one of the best sitcom endings ever. Or not even sitcom endings, best TV endings, because it's not a funny ending, is it? It's a poignant, beautiful, sad ending is what it is.
Yeah.
Which is what it needed to be for a story about World War One.
Yeah. It's interesting reading this when they're talking about, just to get a bit nerdy about machines, when they're talking about, like, there's only one machine essentially to go to, and that's the Quanto machines. And so, like, these are the leaders in the market, and this, that, and the other. And now if you look around, like, I could edit something on my phone now in HD if I wanted to.
Is that the same thing? Is a Quanto machine the same as Quantel that Crichton refers to and then Kirk keeps going on about?
I don't believe so.
I don't know.
Okay.
No, I don't believe that's
Fine.
the one.
So I liked this as an idea, and in theory, it's a really interesting, unusual interview. But I really hate podcast editing. I like chatting, but I hate editing. So I think I went into it prejudiced and didn't find it very interesting. But the last paragraph was fucking great. The guy's anti-outtakes and says, well, we'll never use those. Yeah. 1 year later, the Smeg-ups happened.
Yep.
Which he probably had to do.
Yeah, I'm a bit anti-outtakes, to be honest with you. I think it's cheap television and very passive. I think you get fed up of seeing people falling over and stumbling over their lines. There aren't very many, actually. There aren't many brilliant outtakes. Yeah, there is. In Smeg-outs and Smeg-ups, there's some fucking great ones that we remember as much as the proper series.
I like the idea. I think it's cheap television with the undertone of, but we'll stick it on a VHS and sell it at Christmas.
Fair.
He's not wrong in his cynicism, but I think it's delicious that within a year he had to fucking do it.
Yeah, that's fair.
I like the fact he so casually was like, oh, I wanted to join the BBC, but I was told, don't go now, go to university. So I went to university, and then I joined the BBC. It's like, oh, it's that easy. Awesome. Right, okay.
Wouldn't it be nice?
Yeah. The thing I got from this as well is something I think he talks about. It's probably technically one of the more complex shows on television at the time, which, thinking about, I think we probably take for granted now.
Yeah. But
looking back then, it's like, with this and with what's coming up in the next issue where they talk to Mel Bibby about sets, you're like, actually, this is it's amazing that Red Dwarf lasted this long on the BBC, because it probably does cost a lot and cause a lot of people a lot of headaches.
Yeah.
And when he sort of went, apart from Star Trek, it's like, the comparisons are a lot more than you think.
Yeah.
Also, the massive picture of what his edit suite looks like just looks like a Red Dwarf set.
Yes.
Yeah. Next up is Auntie Holly, which is a spoof problem page, and it's not funny.
Hated it. Absolutely hated it. They could have
Okay.
put an advert in.
I didn't mind this bit. There was
okay.
There was some bits that were a bit crap, but there was one that did really make me laugh, which was, Dear Auntie Holly, girls keep writing me Dear John letters. What can I do, John? Dear John. Oops, sorry, Holly. That made me laugh. But
that's a good joke, I'll admit that. But the rest, I was just like, oh, this... Obviously, they didn't sell the advert space.
Also, there's an inaccuracy. Funamble doesn't mean tightrope walking, unless you're French. It's the French for tightrope walking. It's not an alternative synonym in English. It's the French word for tightrope walking.
That may be correct. I have no fucking idea.
I looked it up because I'm weird.
Fair enough.
Anyway, on the same page, you have been judged worthless. It's the Inquisitor selling you subscriptions.
Again, because we've had that exact bit before.
Yeah. Next up is the polymorph profile, and this, at least on first read, smacked of really scraping the barrel until I then saw that the next comic strip was about the polymorph.
I disagree.
Yeah.
This, for me, I thought was interesting when it starts talking about the origins, because in the show, we don't really get a chance to really find out why the polymorph is what it is. But the thing I think we forget is it was created by somebody, and it says here that they were the ultimate in slave labor. Why build a mechanoid when you can just put in a load of living tissue? Yeah, and then they just bunged it into space when it didn't work.
I think it's the best one so far, don't get me wrong, but it felt like when I saw it that it was scraping the barrel.
Yeah.
Because they'd done all the cast.
Yeah, but I think because it's when they were doing Lister and the Cat and Rimmer, we know so much about them anyway that everything they said we already knew off by heart, even then. Whereas this one, I mean, there's bits here that they've taken from the books. There's bits that they've expanded on slightly. I do like the role models. Well, there was once this trilogy of films, in which a woman called Ripley, and it tails off, which made me think, was Alien 3 out yet? And I looked it up, and it was 92. Which I thought it was later because the first time I saw it was on a German exchange in 1995. That was the first time I saw an Alien film, and it was amazing.
The first three are great.
So I can't remember if it's in this issue or the next. Somebody mentions that the Smegazine has actually added a bit to the lore over time with the cartoon strips and things like that. In this, they mention there's another one rocking around Red Dwarf somewhere, and we're just waiting for it to wake up hungry, which we will see at the end of the episode.
Yeah, it does highlight that was never resolved, yeah.
Well, it comes about in one of the comic strips in a future one, bit of a spoiler, but it does come about. They explain what happened to it.
Ah.
Cool.
Which is quite interesting. Yeah, they follow it up and explain, which I think is really good in that you can, there's a loose end. Let's follow it up in the comics. Which a few shows have done since, like Buffy and Angel and stuff like that.
Yeah.
To be fair, Doctor Who magazine had already done it. Quite a lot.
Yeah, well, obviously that was a pretty big influence on this, wasn't it? There's been quite a few things that were... for British sci-fi magazines, there weren't... Was Starburst out yet at this time? I think basically there was the Doctor Who magazine, and that was pretty much, bits of 2008, 2000 AD were the only things that this was really drawing from as a magazine at that time. Later on, you got stuff like SFX, but That wasn't, I think that was about 94, 95 when that came out.
Talking about 2000 AD, the next comic strip is very 2000 AD, The Shadow Time.
Yes.
And I loved this. I just loved this. The reference to Garbage World, the bleak reminder of what actually happened to Earth in the books. And yeah, I thought this was a really clever take on the polymorph.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it's another one with great artwork again. Weird as fuck artwork, but great. And the fact that you've got the three main characters in this particular story are a armchair, a weird fish humanoid type thing, and a humanoid fridge.
It's so 2018.
I think 'cause this is the first time that it's David Littleton. This is the first time he draws for it, I think, and he comes back. So this must have made a really good impression, because I remember this art style in a few other strips apart from this.
Yeah,
and it's like you say, it's really good. It's different looking from anything else that we've had, and it really stands out.
Yeah,
I'll tell you what this reminded me of, which obviously came significantly later. But Love, Death and Robots. It felt like an episode of that.
I've not watched it. I've heard good things, though.
exactly what I was going to say, yeah.
Love, Death and Robots is well worth watching. It's like little 10 to 20 minute short anthologies of dark sci-fi shit. Some of them are okay. Many of them are exceptionally good sci-fi. It's on Netflix and there's like loads of episodes, 3 series, and it's great. You should watch it. Everyone should watch it. In fact, let's do a podcast. No. I totally would, though, if I had the time. I fucking love that show.
Like you say, this comic strip, it has such a bleak premise of them coming out of hibernation they don't really say, sort of every so often, and then they will go back into hibernation again, but they basically have to survive for a very little amount of time.
Yeah.
But they've been caught, something else is on the planet, which, spoiler, is revealed to be the polymorph.
Yeah.
It's like the prequel to the polymorph, which is just fantastic.
Brilliant stuff. Next up is an article called Hattie Stands Up, which is about Hattie Heritage's stand-up. And I have recently been to the Band on the Wall. That venue is still there. It's been recently had a refurb. I saw the Asian Dub Foundation there a couple of months ago. It's a fucking superb venue and huge.
Really?
So Hattie Heritage had a hell of a gig there. Yeah, it's big.
I was just about to say, how big is it if ADF were there? Awesome.
ADF still got that roadie that stands on stage and dance with them.
No, but they do have a beatboxer flautist.
Right.
Fucking superb. Loved him.
One of the first events I ever hosted was a Love Music Hate Racism thing.
Oh, awesome.
And I was comparing in between the bands, and Asian Dub Foundation were headlining, and they were really nice guys. Their roadie was an absolute wanker. And he thought he was in the band. He wasn't. And you could tell when they saw him that he was like, yeah, you're right, Jeff, how are you? That's not his name, just in case his lawyers are there. But he was on stage like dancing with them, and he was like standing close to the middle. It's like, somebody really needs to tell that lad he's not supposed to be there.
You're a roadie, stop it.
Get off the stage. Yeah, but they were really good. And that was just like one of my first experiences hosting something. It was like with the Asian Dub Foundation and thinking, oh, God, that guy who works for them is a prick. Anyway.
But yeah, I don't think they do, from looking on the website, I don't think they do the stand-up stuff anymore. It is all pretty much music these days. Band on the Wall. Yeah,
it is. It was mainly a music venue anyway, and a nightclub as well.
Yeah.
I think with this, because she talks about her booking process, which is sometimes people phone me and I'll go, sure, but if they're messing around for longer than 10 minutes, she sends them to somebody else.
She did a gig at a pub in Tamworth about 20 years ago. I think it was the Globe in Tamworth, put a comedy night on. And it was the same night that I was at a gig elsewhere. that I'd had tickets for ages, so I didn't get to go. Absolutely gutted about that.
So, this article, right? Did it seem really fucking unprofessional to you?
In what way?
They just didn't find out who the other acts were and said some guy did this and then someone else did this. They're a fucking journalist. Take your notebook. What's your name, pal?
Yeah.
It's not hard.
I thought it was an alright article. I quite liked it.
It actually annoyed me because of that. It felt like really disrespectful to all the other acts, actually. And it's not like Steve Lyons, who's always come up with really good quality shit before.
Okay.
Maybe he's drunk.
I did think while I was reading it, it is difficult to write about stand-up comedy, because particularly with not giving away any of the jokes, which would be an absolute fucking dick move to do. So I'm glad they stuck to that and didn't do that. But I like the fact that Hattie says she's worried that people would think she'd written stuff that was attributed to Holly in the magazine.
Yeah, that was fun.
And there was a bit in there where they said they told her about they've got several suggestive letters that were sent about what people would like to do with Holly, and she asked them to send them on to her because she doesn't usually get letters like that. Which is brave as fuck, because that sounds to me like some people will read that and take it as an invitation.
It's this whole 90s thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
The whole culture made her say something like that because it was so fucking normal.
Yeah.
And it's madness that she actually said that and engaged with it. But I guess that was her fucking norm, and I feel so sorry for her.
Yeah.
She could just be really horny, Mark.
Or she could just be really horny. Next up is the Jake Bullitt and the Case of the Cashed-In Contestant, Part 4, Law Have Mercy. And breathe. It's quite a mouthful for a 2-page fucking comic strip, isn't it?
But it's part 4 of an ongoing series, and I'm liking this series. It's great.
I am too, but I think, well, at this point at least, I thought that it was like, just do us a proper comic strip rather than 2 pages. This isn't fucking androids. This is actually dead good.
It needs a collected version. We've been saying it all along.
Yeah, true.
There needs to be a collected, all of the comic strips that were in this magazine needs a paperback collecting all of them. And all the Jake Bullitt ones need to sort of go together, or at least split into just a couple of parts where they're longer than just 2 pages each.
I honestly think it would have happened by now, but no one knows who has the rights for these strips, so they're just in limbo.
I think that could be the case.
I do love that in this, now it's kind of like the plot's coming together in this Jake Bullock strip, and he goes to visit the Hit You Like to find out who's tried to assassinate him. And the smarmy person's like, one of your assassins just tried to kill me and failed? That's terrible. Well, someone will get a refund. It's like, that's customer service.
But it is great. I just want it all. Next up is an advert for Anne McCaffrey's latest books. There's one in hardback and one in paperback, Damia and Damia's Children. I haven't read those. Have either of you?
Nope.
Do you have any intention of reading them?
Nope.
No, but they are out now in paperback.
They are.
Out then. They might not still be in print.
True. And finally, there is a pin-up of the cat in a black and white outfit with a magnificent hat.
It's great, isn't it?
That is an outfit I could see you wearing, Mark.
I would like to.
Not.
I do not have it, unfortunately.
I would say not today. It'd be too fucking hot to wear that much sort of like
Oh, yeah, it's a bit warm today.
furry type stuff. Also, hopefully not real fur. That would be bad.
Yeah.
Right, so that's issue 13. What was your favourite article, Colin?
My favourite article, as we've probably guessed from when we were talking about it, was the Space Monkeys. More absolutely brilliant Nigel Kitching art, and I quite enjoyed the story. It was very silly. It was ace.
Carl, what about you?
For me, it's a toss-up between the Space Monkeys and the Graham Hutchings interview. I am going to lean towards the Graham Hutchings interview.
Cool.
I just found it really interesting and quite nostalgic, going back and looking at hearing somebody talking about editing technology from the 90s, because that was something when in the first bit of it where it's like, oh yeah, we shot it on Betamax. It's like, oh god, Betamax. Yeah, so definitely the Graham Hutchings interview for me.
It was a close run thing between two comic strips for me, Space Monkeys and The Shadow Time. But I think The Shadow Time just pipped it.
That's cool. I was going to say, is this the first time we've all had three completely separate ones?
I think so.
Potentially. It's been a year.
That's quite... Yeah, I have no idea.
I don't remember. I don't remember what I did yesterday, mate.
That's fair. Least favourite, the 10%ers bit, I just wasn't bothered.
Carl?
Agony Aunt Holly for me.
I'm going to agree with Agony Aunt Holly. I thought it was piss. I haven't decided what I want to do to sign off. I don't know. Colin, what's your favourite chocolate bar? Have we done that one?
I think we have.
Right. What's your favourite non-domestic animal?
Not one that you're actually legally allowed to have as a pet.
Yeah.
Because quite like a pet tiger. I'm not much of a pet person anyway. I would say there are many animals which are cool. I'm going to go with an orange utan. Also known
nice. What's an orange utan?
It's an orangutan, but that's how I used to pronounce it when I was a kid, when I just read it.
Fuck's sake. Carl, what's your favourite non-domestic animal?
I want an elephant, Mark.
I mean, that would be a good thing.
And he wants it now.
Technically, aren't they domestic in India? Don't they ride elephants in India? I'm sure my mum rode on an elephant when she went to India.
That's probably one of the reasons why, they're fairly cuddly, they're fun, you could ride them, and it's not...
True.
People wouldn't look at me riding one and like, look at that fat lad on that thing, but because it's an elephant.
Did you see the news report about the elephant that was this week, that's probably ages ago from when this actually goes out? Where there was a woman in India, who was basically associated with poachers and used to help poachers find where the elephants were. Elephants got quite good memories and can recognise people. So one trampled her to death. And then when she was having her funeral, the same elephant came in and trampled on her coffin.
Good.
Love this.
Yes. That elephant is a badass.
And this is why, and take this advice home with your listeners, always be nice to elephants.
Hell yeah.
Agree. And for me, right, I've been to a lot of zoos because I'm very fond of zoos, but obviously only the ones that do conservation programs and shit. But I went to a zoo that had 9 lions, and they had 9 lions because they rescued them from an evil, illegal zoo that had them in tiny, tiny cages. But when I went there, the boy lion roared, and honestly, you would have to hear it to believe it. Live, it's different to what you see on the telly. Just the sheer incredible noise of this beautiful big kitty with good hair doing a big ass roar. That's why lions are my favourite animal. It was always going to be a big cat, wasn't it? But lions, because they're the only ones that roar like that.
You didn't call it a big kitty with good hair, and that's why it roared at you, was it, Mark?
I was a long way away from the big kitty with good hair. Right, it's time to go. I've got to edit this dog shit. So thank you very much for joining us for another episode of Shipwrecked and Comatose. So until next time.
Nobody's thought
of anything witty. Anyone got anything witty? Fuck it.
I'm too fucking tired to think of anything witty. Just stick that at the end.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast network, which can be found online at wemadethispod.com or on Twitter at We Made This Pod.
Elsewhere on We Made This.
Giddy carousel of pop.
By 1989, I'd actually landed a job working at a fashion PR agency called Lynn Frank's PR. This particular issue is memorable to me because it was our first Smash Hits cover for our client, Nana Cherry. They never told you if you'd get a cover or not. There'd always be this kind of cat and mouse. Well, we'll look at it as a great feature and we'll have to have our own shoot and we'll have to this, and then there's quite a long period of negotiation and you never really knew if you got the cover until it came out. And I remember, when you go down and see it on the newsstand, it was a fantastic feeling. It just felt like, this is my sort of goal in extra time to win the FA Cup moment.
Chucky Vision, a Chucky podcast.
The introduction, the editorial, if you will, was written by David Campetti, and it shows real love and isn't shy about having a dig at cheap-ass, lazy film adaptations.
Yeah, Campetti is an interesting one as the co-founder of Innovation and also the editor. Yeah, a lot of his editorials are hawking other merch, hawking, the different books and stuff they're putting out, but it never felt too corporate. He has a passion in his voice that he very much is enthusiastic and enjoys that they're getting to adapt these franchises.
It does seem like he's definitely acquired Chucky because he's a fan.
Read and Buried podcast.
The theme this month was an Anne Rule book, so true crime, but not The Stranger Beside Me, which is her big book that broke the world of true crime fiction, non-fiction. True crime fiction, I just said. That's not a sentence.
Yeah.
He fell in love.
Oh.
He's so in love, but still not in love enough to stop using sex workers.
Yeah.
But in love enough to not murder them. So...
Okay.
He's a romantic, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, what a man.
What a dreamy man.
But his actual name was Robert Knickerbocker.
Wow.
Which is like the best surname ever.
Do you think maybe she thought no one's going to believe this is a real name?
Well, yeah, that could have been it.
If I'm wrong, please don't correct me. I don't want to know. I want to stand right. Thank you.
Check out all of these shows and more on the We Made This podcast network.